The Candlelight. My grandfather told me a ghost story as a child from his childhood neighborhood back in Michigan that supposedly is true. Across from his home lived an old lady who lived by herself, and at night on her windowsill, before going to sleep, she lit a candle, and my grandfather could always see the distant glow from the candle peeking through his window as he fell asleep. The old woman wasn't particularly a kind person. In fact, most of the children in the neighborhood were scared of her, and a rumor circulated around the neighborhood children that she was some kind of witch that lured children into her home, and they were never seen from again. Now, there was no evidence of this, but there were a rash of child disappearances around that neighborhood during that time, so who's to say? But whatever the case, the children, including my grandfather, never walked past her house on her side of the street. Well, one night, the little old woman lit her candle like she always did, but the next morning she did not wake up. She had died from a heart attack, found stiff in her bed, with a tormented, painful look on her face. My grandfather actually was the one who found her, because his mother asked him to return a pot she had let them borrow for the previous night's supper. And when the old woman did not come and retrieve it, my grandfather's mother became concerned. Needless to say, my grandfather was frightened when he came across the old woman's stiffened, pained corpse. He ran back home and told his mother what he had seen, and the paramedics came and removed the old woman's body. My grandfather said the incident replayed in his head all that day. He didn't go outside and play with his friends. He didn't do anything but sit in his room and picture the old woman's tortured face. Later that night, after he brushed his teeth and washed his face, he got into bed, pulled the covers up to his chin, and closed his eyes. After laying in bed for a few minutes, he felt the warm, familiar glow from the distant candle on the old woman's windowsill. Now there was no one staying at that house. The old woman lived alone, and no one ever lit that candle but the old woman. My grandfather sat up quickly and looked over towards the old woman's house, and he saw the candlelight flickering in the window, and standing over the flame was a silhouette of an old woman. Just then the figure bent down, and the glow of the flame revealed the old woman's face. My grandfather said she stared at him and smiled, then blew the candle out. True story. The story begins like this. My granddad and his wife, obviously young then, lived on a street called Larkle Rise, a road near Clapham Common tube station. I won't give the door number in case ghouls go to check it out. It is in new owner's hands now. Every night my granddad, Donald, and his wife Anne sat by the fire listening to what they used to call the wireless radio in today's terms. His mom also occupied the house, too, as was quite large. Her husband was killed in the war, so every night when she retired to bed, she would knock on their door with her stick to signify she was off to bed upstairs. Always 3 knocks. A nighttime ritual or habit. Eventually, of course, she died. The funeral was arranged, and the wake was held at the house. After everyone had gone, and I suppose all was tidied away, my granddad and grandmother decided to go to bed. They sat down first to reflect upon the day, when the knock came at the door. It only happened this one time. Every time I think of this, my hair stands up on end, and I get chills as I know every inch of that house, so I know the path she took each and every night. The house got sold after Granddad and Granny died. I do wonder, though, if the new owners hear anything. Something is wrong with my home. When I go into my home, I can never get rid of this creepy feeling I get. Whenever I walk in, I automatically feel like I'm being watched, and I have experienced a lot of things that have been happening, and I will list them here, but this will be a kind of long list. Hearing people shuffle, talk, or call my name, even though I know I'm home alone. And when I'm just chilling and doing my normal daily activities, I feel things touch me, whisper, mumble, making a clicking sound, creepy growling, and seeing things pop out of corners, only for it to disappear shortly after. And I would never forget the time when I was on call with someone, and they said in my hallway they saw someone walk out of my bathroom and asked if someone was with me, which I told him no one was with me. And another time, I was on call with a different friend, and she said that she saw something looking through my window. And when I asked if she was joking, she said no. What do I do? The Whistler. This is also a true story. When my sister and I were very young, I mean about 6 or 7, we lived in an old place, an odd place, an old school near Tooting Bec Tube Station, South London. Our dad was a school caretaker there, as was his dad before. His dad, our grandfather, on my dad's side, took his life by drinking drain cleaning fluid. My nan found him dying on the bed, all burnt around his face. The most creepy thing is that he made a cheese sandwich and left it uneaten on the kitchen table, and his glasses too. There was a long hall from the kitchen to the bedroom. He must have carried the drain cleaner, I guess was kept under the sink or someplace, all the way down, sat on the bed, and drank it. In the hospital, his stomach injuries were so bad, it took a long time for him to die. There was nothing they could do. He died. When doing his rounds at night, he used to whistle, so the story begins. He died before we knew any of this, as before we were born. So when we heard whistling outside our bedroom window at night that faced the playground, we thought nothing of it. Years later, our mom told us what happened to him, and when reminiscing, said he liked to whistle when doing the nightly check. I asked my dad, "Did you whistle too, when you locked up after taking the job?" He said no. I believe him, as he never whistles, not even a hum. My mom also heard the whistling too, as her bedroom was next to ours. I think my dad did too, but he gets angry when you ask him about it. He does not believe in ghosts, and it was his dad. I suppose we heard his ghost doing his rounds. I don't know the tune, my sister doesn't either. I can still hear it, but it's not sad or happy. It's just a tune without a tune. Hard to explain. I wonder if he still does his nightly rounds, whistling. I had a realization tonight that made my hair stand on edge. For context, I've been watching a lot of BuzzFeed paranormal videos because they're entertaining, but they also remind me of everything paranormal I've ever been through. I like to remember my experiences to relate to the experiences they're talking about. But tonight, I made an intense realization that made goosebumps shoot down my arms. I've always had a strange reaction to specifically the paranormal. I'm a 20-year-old man that has only really cried when an extreme emotional event happens, death in the family, hard breakups, etc. But whenever I hear something unreasonably paranormal, my eyes randomly produce tears. Could be a ghost story, could be someone talking about a ghost experience. I don't feel scared at all. Actually, I feel calm with a feeling of being unnerved. I really don't understand why this happens. Keep this in mind, because it kind of ties into this. I've always had a weak immune system, and it was worse as a kid. This one time, I was incredibly sick and bedridden to the point of hallucination. I saw a hawk fly into my window that didn't exist, but most notably, I saw a full-scale apparition. I mean, it didn't even look like a traditional ghost. It wasn't see-through. It wasn't staring at me or talking to me or anything. If I could describe it, it was like when the white blood cells travel across your eye as it moved that way. This apparition had long flowing blonde hair, flowing as if she were underwater. Weird fact, because I'm studying to be a marine biologist and will most likely have a job close to the sea. But I digress. She was wearing a wedding dress, and as soon as I saw her, my mind went, I will marry this woman one day. The apparition then phased through a door and disappeared. Pretty creepy, but I chalked it up to being delusional. Thoughts of a child that's incredibly sick. Fast forward at least 6 years. I have a shelf on my wall that holds nerd things. In particular, a bottle of Juggernog from the Call of Duty series. I get up from my bed to do something, and I notice the bottle is missing from the shelf. As soon as I realize this, the bottle comes zooming past my head from behind me, as if someone had thrown it. It doesn't shatter, it just hits the carpet, but I remember it spinning past my head. There's zero possibility it dropped from the shelf. I was standing at least 2 feet away from it, and it landed nowhere near where it would have landed. Even if it had fallen, it would have fallen on my desk below the shelf and shattered. I was calm for zero reason. I checked my closet, which was the direction it came from. Nothing. My mind went, intruder in my closet? Nope. Okay. I placed the bottle back on the shelf and walked away. My intense realization was the ghost woman in the wedding dress disappeared in the exact same location the bottle would have been thrown from. And both times I was incredibly calm, even though I had experienced someone throwing something at me, as well as seeing a full-scale apparition. I don't know what to make of this realization. I'm out of that house, as it's my parents' house, and nothing else malicious has ever happened to us, so I'm not worried. The only typical Indian burial ground scenario to explain any of this is that the house is built on land where the Civil War was fought, but I don't find that really relevant. This is one of the many strange occurrences that happened in that house, but nothing else is worth mentioning. I just wanted to share this realization to some people who might find it interesting. The coincidence is too close. Everything that happened in this recount was over the years we all lived with my mom. April 2012, we moved from one side of town to the other, a simple house swap, which is common in the UK. We moved in quickly and settled in pretty quickly too. A few weeks go by and we had nothing to note of. It just seemed normal. Not even 6 months there, and my sister started talking about the ghost that lives in the house and how she called it Kevin. We all laughed about it, even her, because we hadn't seen or heard anything that would suggest a haunting. One night, I'm playing on my PS4 with my brother, probably Call of Duty. The game is irrelevant. We hear our sister screaming to my stepdad, asking, "Did you just throw the remote at me?" We laughed, but were intrigued, so we asked her what the fuck she was shouting about. She explained that she was doing homework, and then her door opened and her Xbox controller was thrown at her from the other side of her room. She didn't use the controller, so this was a little strange, but we just told her that she's being stupid and went back to gaming. A couple nights go by, and the same thing happened again. Controller was thrown, and she's shouting at my stepdad. He then says back, "Why the fuck would I get up, go upstairs to your room, throw your controller at you, come back downstairs, and carry on watching TV?" She was confused by it, and just says, "Then this house is actually haunted, if nobody did it." I decided to chill out and watch TV with him that night. I wasn't at school the next day, weekends, so I was up until 3 a.m.-ish. At about 2 a.m., we were just getting through a film, and we heard what sounded like someone walking across the landing to the bathroom and then to the top of the stairs. My bedroom door was right at the top of the stairs, so I shouted up, "Get out of my room!" My mom goes to bed at 10 or 11 p.m., so she shouted down, "Nobody is there. What are you talking about?" My stepdad says back, "We just heard someone walk to the toilet and then walk to the top of the stairs." This exchange went on for a couple of minutes and finished with, "Whatever," from both sides of the conversation. The walking noises kept happening, but one morning, soon after the controller incidents, my sister asked if anyone came to her room in the early hours because she saw a black figure in the doorway, watching her. None of us knew what she was talking about, and then that's when Kevin was mentioned more frequently. On occasions, my mom would ask if anyone had walked past her because she felt breathing on her neck. I always said, "Probably Kevin." She laughed it off, but I could tell she didn't want to admit there might be a ghost. That night, I was in bed, watching Family Guy or some other shit TV program, and I saw a white figure in my doorway, even though my door was closed before I went to bed. I turned my TV off, rolled over, and went to sleep. Couldn't see it. Couldn't be bothered to deal with it. The appearances never happened again after that, but the walking never stopped, and it was always between 2 and 2:30 a.m. We eventually just blocked out the noise, and it didn't really affect us too much. 2 years ago, we experienced something that has changed how I look at the house forever. I've moved out since, but I know this house is haunted because of this event, which was my stepdad was on his way out with his mates to go do some repairs for one of them, and a man walked past them and just stood around looking at the houses. They all drove off and he stayed still. My mom, who saw my stepdad off, saw the man and asked if he was with them. The conversation went, "Oh no, I used to live here, in the haunted house." "Which one?" My mom replied. He pointed to our house. My mom then said, "Why's it haunted?" He then told her, "Oh, the family that lived there had a daughter who was murdered by her boyfriend. Her bedroom was at the end of the landing. That was my sister's room." My mom then told him that we already know the house is haunted and that my sister has called it Kevin. He then chuckled and told her, "No, the ghost is called Vicky. Her brother is called Kevin." He said his farewell, but just before he left, my mom got the surname of the family from him. My mom recognized the surname because while she was growing up, there was an elderly couple that lived near her with the same surname. She phoned her auntie and asked about the family, and she told my mom, yeah, they used to live there, but they moved because they lost their daughter and didn't like it there because of the bad memory. And then they moved to where my mom grew up. If you want to hear the story of Vicky, feel free to comment and I'll share it. Little house in Creston, Iowa. When I was younger, I'm talking from the ages of 0 to 6, my family and I lived in this house in Creston, Iowa. I'll never forget the place. It was 2 stories. The attic was technically 3 bedrooms, and mine was the one up the stairs. Go up the stairs through my brother's bedroom, hang a left through my parents' room, and to the back. Picture a bedroom with slanted walls and 2 windows in the back. That was my room. A bedroom through a bedroom to a bedroom. The layout of this place makes 0 sense. It also had a basement that, from my very vague memory, never stopped flooding. Not sure what that has to do with the story, but I'd like to know what happened to this place. I remember a little road that if you followed it around the back, you'd go under this tunnel bridge that supported trains. If you'd look out the side window from the kitchen, you can see the public baseball fields. I'm 32 now, my brother 29, and we still have dreams about this nightmare for children. Every night when I would go to sleep, I would see these glowing eyes in my windows. 2 sets of them on occasion, like it brought its frickin' buddy to come peep on this 5-year-old in the 2nd-story window. I would tell Mom all the time. To this day, she thinks I made it up. She gave me the typical mom response and told me to stand up to my fears. I did. Once. That night, I yelled, "Go away!" And the body that the eyes were attached to started to frantically try to open the window. I had them locked, of course. Wouldn't go to bed without them locked. As soon as the growling and rattling started, I gunned it to my brother's room, and the little guy is floating out of his crib. I go to my mom's bed while having one of those throat-dry, can't-scream moments, trying to push her awake. My father comes, walking up the stairs, and my brother falls back in his crib. Dad hears him screaming, and me standing there crying and reaching for him, and he puts us both back to sleep. I didn't sleep. About a week went by that I didn't sleep, and Mom invited my grandparents to stay the night. My grandpa was apparently the only thing that could calm me. That old geezer made me feel safe, you know. On the 3rd night of his stay, the eyes were back, so I go downstairs to snuggle up to my grandpa while he's asleep on the couch. When I rounded the corner, I could see something black floating up through his stomach and up through the ceiling. He's gasping for air and begging something above his head to make it stop. I was so freaked I froze. The next morning I asked him about it. He said an angel was patting his head, telling him it was going to be okay. It's almost over. My brother was 3 and I was 5. My grandparents are all passed now. There is no way we should still be seeing this shit in our sleep by the time we're 30. I want to know if that place is still standing and if anything has happened to anyone else who stayed there. I'd just like to know that it wasn't just us. The street address is 231 Chestnut Street, Creston, Iowa. Short story on my ghost sighting at Hume Lake. It's been a long time since this happened. I think 2006-ish. I can't remember the exact year, but it was shortly before I entered high school. I did one of those week-long Christian summer camps with my school at Hume Lake in California. I've done a little internet searching, but never found other stories connected with the campground. I'm hoping by sharing mine that maybe someone else will have experienced something similar in that place. One night, everybody in the camp gets into the big auditorium and speakers talk about life, death, Jesus, the works. They had the silent time, and I was feeling emotional at that point because a cousin had passed away within the last year, and everything they talked about just combined and overwhelmed me. So I wanted to go back to the cabin to be by myself and cry a bit. I'm normally a scaredy cat with a big imagination of the dark, but with all that I was thinking of, I didn't feel scared to walk alone. The cabin was close to the edge of the camp, with a dirt road separating it from the woods. There were orange street lights on the road I was walking up, but not on that road where it teed off. At the T in the road, right in the tree line, was a human-sized white shape, like it was made of white light. No distinguishable legs or arms, but I could clearly see a head and shoulders. So picture a head shape down to shoulders, and then the sides just went straight down to the ground. There were no strange sounds or anything else. I effing bolted back down the way I came and bumped into my group of cabin mates since the auditorium event finished. One tried to say that maybe I saw a cougar or wild animal. For years, I would involuntarily tear up and get chills and goosebumps when retelling this. Since then, I also tear up when I hear others' first-person ghost stories. I wish I hadn't gotten scared at the time. But anyway, I've always hoped I'm not the only one to have seen something there. I met my grandma's boyfriend 11 years later. On a hot May day in 2013, my parents' brother and I went to Chicago to pick up my sister from her university upon graduation. After she graduated, we went to Giordano's Pizzeria, which of course is a hands-down best pizza in all of North America. We were all packed in a booth waiting for our food when we somehow began talking about our old house. By this time, we were living across town for about 10 years and never spoke about the times we had in that house. This old house was a Cape Cod-style house, built in the early 1920s on the north side of Lansing, Michigan. My mom grew up in this home as her mom, my grandma, was running it. By the 1990s, it was in the family as the landlord knew and loved my mom. My mom and dad ended up moving in the house around 1996 when I was 2. By the time I was 6 or so, I began to see my parents' demeanor about the house change. I remember one time my dad rushing home because my grandma heard noises and whispers in the basement. That's for another time. So we were going around the table telling stories about the house, and then I began to tell mine. I tell them about this time when I was about 7 years old. My sister and I used to share the entire upstairs part of the house, just one huge bedroom with an attic, 2 closets, and tons of play space, because my brother was still a baby and took over a room in the lower level of the house. It was around 10 or so, and I vividly remember watching Dragon Ball Z. Suddenly, I heard the door to our room open. I knew we were supposed to be asleep, so I do what every kid does, play sleep. I could hear the stairs lightly getting stepped on, and I'm giggling as I'm hoping not to get caught awake. At this time, by my mom. I could feel something getting closer to me, and I'm thinking it's my mom, and suddenly I feel my bed sink as someone has sat on it. I continue to act asleep. Then I feel someone grab my leg and rub it. It was a very gentle rub. This person then began to playfully smack my legs a few times, and I feel the bed spring up. I peek over the blanket and see a tall, dark figure, maybe 6 feet or so, wearing a trench coat and a baseball hat. He looked like my Grandpa Charles, a grandpa that was still alive and very well. At this time, he just moved to Denver, and I was thinking he returned to surprise us. I watched this tall gentleman look back and smile. He was an extremely kind man. Before I could see him go too far, I felt myself fall asleep. I wake up the next day and ask my mom, "Where's Grandpa Charles?" In which she responds, "Honey, you know he left a few weeks ago to Colorado." Fast forward to 2013. I tell them this story for the first time, and my mom and dad look at me, shocked. They are speechless. They lean into the table and say, "Honey, that was Bill. He was your grandma's boyfriend. In 1992, he had a heart attack and died in your room while fixing the cupboard up there. He loves your aunt like his own child and always wore a trench coat and baseball hat." I've never met Bill, as I was born in 1994. He must have just wanted to see me, and from what I can tell, he was happy to be able to meet us. Haunted. I'm not alone in this house. I thought I was imagining the faint creak of floorboards in the dead of night, and the inky shadow flitting silently across the room when I went to investigate, gone long before my fumbling hands found the light switch. But yesterday, whatever it is, made its presence clear. I awoke to a clattering from the kitchen, the sound echoing through the silent house and sending electricity shooting through my nerves. I raced downstairs, heart hammering, grabbing a baseball bat to defend myself. As I approached the kitchen, I heard the clicking of sharp claws scraping against the floor. Whatever it was vanished before I turned on the light, but all my utensils had been knocked off their hooks and strewn across the ground. I cleared up the mess, still shaking from shock, and went back to bed. The next morning, there was a dead bird on my carpet, eyes shut, beak open, wings splayed wide to reveal the bloody gash across its chest. My heart sunk. There was no playful, mischievous ghost. This was a warning. I buried the bird in the garden and began researching how to appease an angry spirit. I burned herbs and wafted the smoke around my house, then surrounded my bed with a circle of salt. That night was quiet, and for a while I thought the problem had gone away. But then the bird returned, caked with dirt, inside my protective salt circle. Its open beak seemed to be laughing, mocking my feeble attempt to keep the evil at bay. This time I didn't bury it. I threw it in the bin and shut the lid. I went to bed feeling like there were eyes watching me from the shadows. When I finally slept, I had an awful dream where I couldn't breathe. Something was pressing on my chest, something dark and ominous and invisible in the blackness. I was helpless, pinned, my ears filled with a rumbling growl that struck terror into my heart. I drifted in and out of sleep, feverish, and I'm not sure whether I was dreaming when I saw a pair of glowing eyes looking down at me. Finally, morning came. The comforting light of the rising sun washed away the terror of last night. I relaxed, then chills spread across my body as I realized I could still hear That menacing rumbling. It was still here. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I searched for the beast that had been terrorizing me. I tracked the sound to my wardrobe, the door slightly ajar. I gripped the baseball bat with sticky palms. One way or another, this was going to end today. I held my breath and opened the door. A fat black cat was curled, purring, atop a pile of clothes. It opened its eyes and let out a contented meow. I stared for a moment and burst out laughing. It all made sense now. Perhaps I overreacted. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your generous donations. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchessof.darkness or Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. Thank you so much for joining me, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your support and your kindness. Until next time.